sat down at my computer and I wrote a letter to the universe. And I'd been following Kathy Freston on Instagram because I'd bought her books. And, I remember seeing her on Oprah and being like, oh, I want whatever she has, because she had like this just glow and health and sparkle about her. And she's vegan. I bought her book. That was a long time ago. But anyway, I sent the letter to Rich Roll and I sent it to Kathy. And Kathy answered the letter.
That was a clip from today's guest. Everybody, welcome back. I am super psyched about today's interview. I always love when we can talk about vegan stuff, but it's more than just about like veganism. It's more than just about like the philosophy of the diet or the lifestyle. It's also about how those things interact with the real world, with business, like with family, with how we view our footprint in the world. This is an incredible conversation. And even if you're not vegan, and I say even especially if you're not vegan, there's something in it for everybody. Before we get to it, please subscribe to the podcast and turn on your notifications. My name is Aram and this is One Step Beyond. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I have been real excited about this conversation. It hits kind of every note of what makes me excited to talk to anybody. But for the uninitiated, for those who don't know, who are you and what do you do?
My name is Jennifer Barrett, and I am a farmer. For most of my life, I was a chicken and cattle farmer. I started in the chicken industry when I was in ninth grade with my parents. And in 2016, my husband and I did a plant-based diet, and which woke us up. And so now we are vegan and we continue to manage the farm. We still have 230 cows and manage the land and the cows. It's a big job. We still consider ourselves farmers, but we are in transition still, trying to find a path forward in plant-based agriculture. After having left behind animal agriculture. So it's still hard for me to like pinpoint exactly what I do, because I still do consider myself a farmer, but we're not actually farming anything. We're just managing the land and the cows that still remain, which in and of itself is a whole big job. But I'm also a writer and a photographer and a mom and a grandma, and my family is very important to me. And so my days are filled with lots of variety of lots of things.
All right, let's get into it. So you'd mentioned, was it 1989 when your family got into the industry of raising chickens?
It was in 1987.
87.
Whenever we started here on the farm. We moved from South Louisiana. My dad was in the oil field and oversaw different jobs. And so we moved a lot. The longest we ever stayed anywhere was 2 years. And so I was used to moving around a lot. And then in 87, when the oil field, crashed and dad got laid off, we started over basically and moved to Arkansas, where my mom's parents lived, and we had family here. So we moved to Arkansas, and then my grandfather's brother, my great uncle, had this property here in Wicks, where we live now, and offered that property and the chicken farming business to my dad. So we jumped into chicken farming after, living in middle-class suburbia all my life and moving out to, like middle of nowhere, Arkansas in the hills and raising chickens in
Wow.
ninth grade. Yeah.
So is it ninth grade? How old were you?
I was 14.
14. So you transplanted into this place, into this
Mhm.
industry, and not that just that though. You actually part of living there was that you were actually like part of farm operations. You were actually involved in doing stuff on the farm, right?
Absolutely. That was my dad's. That was a contingency. Dad was like, if we're going to do this, everybody's going to have to be involved. It's going to have to be a family operation. And, we had to, you know, basically promise that we were going to be involved in working and taking care of the chicken farm. And we did. And then in 88, we got our first small herd of cows as well, and started understanding and being involved in, a cow calf operation as well.
What was your day to day like in terms of like being involved, and not just like at 14, but you're in your first run at being a part of the farm before you and your husband later on took it over? Like, what were you doing? Like, what kinds of stuff were you involved in?
The day to day stuff was like every day, dead chickens had to be picked up. So the whole floor, the barns were big. There was a 600-foot long chicken house that held 30,000 chickens. Then one of them held 20,000 chickens. It was 400 feet long. And then there was a 300-foot long one that held 15,000 chickens. So we had 65,000 chickens. And the floors had to be walked every day. You had to pick up the dead chickens. You couldn't just leave dead chickens in the floor, and they die 24 hours a day. You're going to lose some with that many chickens in a building. And so one of the farm practices is to keep the floors clean, which is picking up the dead birds. So that's one of the things. Um, when we first started with the old technology, um, the waterers had to be cleaned. I used to go through with a toilet brush, and they had these big, like dome shaped waterers. They call them plasons, and they would get moldy, and the chickens would get, poop would get slung in there. So you'd have to go through daily and like clean these waterers. And I could go on and on, but there's so much different equipment that had to be dealt with. We had feeders that ran with chains, and those would often fail and would have to be repaired. Um, and so I got to be involved in not just ranching is, it's not just taking care of animals, it's taking care of all the equipment that goes with taking care of the animals. So I learned, you know, um, basic skills like, plumbing and electrical and things like that. Cause you just, to keep things running. Um, so, but, on the daily, it was, getting the chickens picked up. Um, Sometimes in the summertime, we would just go through and walk through the chickens to get them up off the floor to keep air circulating, because there was a risk in the summertime of them getting too hot, and if they all sat down and didn't get up and get air moving, they could suffocate, and you'd have like a big kill off, and which did happen a few times when summers got hot and the chickens were big. And um just like a tractor bucket loads of dead chickens coming out of these chicken houses. I could really go on and on and on about what is involved in the day-to-day, life of a chicken farmer.
I wanted to ask just to like get a sense of like how this teenager who was in like suburbia, how deeply you were involved when you made that switch. Like you were really in the mix, like really doing this stuff. I just out of curiosity, why were the chicken? Why I know it's like we're talking about tens of thousands of chickens. Why indoors? Why do they have to be inside in such cramped quarters?
To control the environment, to control, uh, because the way that a chicken farmer makes money is by the pound, and the way the industry makes money is by the pound. And if a chicken is outdoors, it's moving, it's exercising, it's burning off the calories that it's eating. When they're indoors, they're contained to, small quarters, so they they have just enough room to get up and eat and drink and then lay back down. That's the fastest way to grow a bird. Um, if they're running around outside, it's gonna take forever for them to gain weight.
Yeah. So, and that would be the difference then between like chickens farmed this way versus free range chickens. Free range
Right.
chickens would have the free range. Okay.
Yeah.
When you made the shift from, again, living in the suburbs, just being a normal teenager to doing this, did you have any like shell shock? Not to excuse the term shell shock, but did you
What
did,
a pun.
did
Yeah.
did you have any shell shock of being like, oh, like, so this is how we treat? I don't mean shell shock living in the country. I mean shell shock like understanding how chickens were raised.
Absolutely. Um, because I was a consumer, like I lived in the suburbs and I didn't understand where chicken came from. You just went through the McDonald's drive-through and got the chicken nuggets. And I even remember when chicken nuggets became a thing. It used to be just like fried chicken. You had to do it the old-fashioned way. And then when chicken nuggets became a thing. Um, and so the first time that we came to the farm, um, the chickens had just been sold, so the houses were empty. The first chicken house that I stepped into was that 600-foot long one, and I walked in the middle door, and so there's 300 feet on this side, 300 feet on this side, and it was so massive, and um, the waters and all of the equipment and everything, the feed lines hanging from the ceilings. I I remember it was just like this kind of visceral experience of realizing, oh, this is where chickens come from. This is how they're raised. And really kind of feeling like, oh, how smart and how like duh, how else would you raise them? They have to come from somewhere. And when you think of it on the scale of how many people are eating chicken, how many people are going through the McDonald's drive-through, and that of course chickens have to come from somewhere, and me making that connection of this is how it happens um in that moment with an empty chicken house. And then going through the process of getting ready for baby chicks, we were helped out by the community and also the field techs who worked for the integrator, the company that we raised for. Um, and then when it came time for baby chicks to come, back then they came on a bus. They're in crates on a like tall crate. The crates are stacked, and they came on a bus, and a guy would a dolly them off of the bus and into the chicken house, and then you dumped them into the floor. And so there's just like crates of baby chickens. And I remember just like being amazed and also like, this is crazy that these boxes are filled with baby birds and we were just dumping them into the floor. And we had neighbors there to help us, and it was a pretty fast event, like all hands on deck, and somebody's pulling the dolly and taking the empty crates out, and the house is just filling up with baby chicks. And you have to be careful how you're walking so you don't step on them. And that part, to me, whenever all those baby chickens got placed in the house, um to me that was like, for one thing, I've always been an animal lover my whole life. I loved animals, and then to see that many baby chickens in one place, it felt like such a responsibility, like an overwhelming responsibility. Like, how are we? It just felt huge because it's so many baby birds, and feeling that constant need to be checking and making sure, that they're okay, making sure that they have water and feed, and then making sure that the water lines aren't leaking and making a mess, and or that the feed lines are working, and it's constant 24-hour surveillance of these houses of baby birds.
So you come from a multi-generational family of farmers,
Mhm.
because not only your parents take this on, but it was in your father's family before that, and then it was carried on by you later on in your story, and we'll get there. What's standing out to me is like your initial introduction to this was like, oh, this makes sense, and then when you're seeing it's happening, it's coming from a place of care, like, oh, we have to take care of these animals. When was your first recollection of a time where you said, hey, is this right? Was that like way down the line, or was there any of that mingled in along the way?
When I look back on it now, I can see that I was always questioning it. Like, there was always a question mark there. I can admit that now, but, um, I I don't know that there was a time before, like, the big awakening that I allowed that question to even come up, or because it was too confronting. It was something that I buried, and, you know, dissociated from. Um, so I've been finding out in the last few years how good I was at dissociating, but there was always a question mark there, and there was times when, like, I would see something happen, like, because the chickens, not only you had to pick up the dead ones, you also had to cull them. So the sick ones or the weak ones or the ones that were not gonna make you money going across the scale at the plant, they had to be culled out. Um, so and I could never do that job. I never could cull the chickens. And um so Rodney did that job, or my dad did that job. I just picked up the ones that were all dead. I did not or or I would pick them up and put them in the bucket. And so I think realizing that, that was probably I was it was not when I was a teenager, because I just was a kid then and I accepted that this was the way it was. But after I had my own kids, and we came back and started raising, then I started having a little bit of ethical questioning, because I was like, I can't kill these birds. I cannot make myself do it. There's something in me that won't allow me to kill them. And I genuinely thought that um men had a gift, like, to be able to carry out this thing, that because I was too sensitive and too um I was too sensitive to do it, which sensitivity in animal agriculture is like a weakness, like you and so I really thought that, Rodney and my dad, and that men were given this sort of gift or ability to be able to kill animals, to kill the animals for our food, for meat, and then if they need to, mercifully kill them. And which I couldn't do. So I know when I started thinking along those lines, then definitely there was the question mark there.
I love how you said you wouldn't let you wouldn't let those thoughts or those questions come up. Like you were like actively kind of like pushing them away, and like even like not even consciously doing it, just they weren't coming up. I
Mhm.
think there's probably like a lot of wisdom in terms of like you're young. It's how your family makes a living. You made this big life change. It's your day to day. There's all of these things. Um, Something though to go back to the comment about loving animals. I firmly believe that a lot of people who farm animals, who are hunters, who are involved, like I know a ton of people, like countless people who eat animals and also love animals. And I don't see a contradiction in that. I think both things are possible, are totally possible. But it's the how strong is somebody's ability to like push down those questions that they might have, or to maybe not push them up and then be able to rationalize their way through them. I just want to get your thoughts on like, because you live in a farming community, is there a disconnect between people loving animals and then being part of animal agriculture?
I can speak for myself as a farmer, and knowing how we treated our animals, and knowing how Um, if you're going to be a good farmer, if you're going to be a good chicken farmer and a good cattle farmer, you have to take care of them. They have to be healthy, um, and well cared for. And there is an element of love. And if your beliefs, which most people are, is that, animals are here for us for food, which of course that's what I believed. Um, then there's this kind of story that you tell yourself about symbiosis, and that, that it's the circle of life, and with that comes this sacrifice, and but that, the health of the animal is so important to the farmer, because I mean it's not just for the health of the animal, but for his pocketbook. I mean, that if you're going to be a good cattle rancher, you have to take care of your cows. If you're going to be a good chicken farmer, you have to take care of your chickens, and or goats, or whatever it is. And so I one of the things that was hardest for me to hear in the vegan community was that, the farmers are cruel, and murderers, and all of these things. And it just like hurt my heart to know that people think these things about farmers, because I honestly don't think that people who have not been around farmed animals can have that intimate knowledge of their lives. And there's something there, I think, that farmers, it's hard to say love, because they love their animals, which whenever I was, farming, the chickens to me were chickens. I mean, like we took care of them. We took care of our business when it came to chickens. That was our bread and butter. When it came to the cows, we had cow calf operation, which meant that, babies were being born, and being involved in birth, and the event of a birth, and making sure that the mama is healthy, and that, that the baby's nursing, and all of those very tender moments of life. Those are things that we as farmers found. We didn't find that, any less miraculous, or, we didn't find less wonder in it because they were just a number or a commodity. They were still, it was still our cows, and we were still, involved in that whole process of, birth. And then you have to make the very necessary decision to take the calves to the sale barn, whenever they're weaning weight and ready to go. I mean, it's just part of good ranching practice. That's what happens. And that was the part that um, I think all farmers dissociate from.
Right.
I think you just have to dissociate from uh, the end final thing that has to happen to an animal for them to become a food product.
I really feel that, as the kind of plant-based farming becomes moves towards being more viable, economically viable, and as we're like talking about the idea of like maybe more farms converting to that or starting off from that, many people are raised with the idea that animals are food. And really, like historically, like I mean, from just like a circle of life as we're talking about, like any of this stuff, it's like, well, yeah, there was a time where that's totally true. It makes total sense. And we're also not talking about like mass scale factory farming or kind of like independent farmers who are like then in these big contracts, which I know we'll get to later on, that has the kind of like the illusion of being independent farmers, but you're kind of part of this big system. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking like most people are raised with the idea that animals are our food, just in many other, is just like the circle of life for many animals involves eating other animals. So we're raised with that idea, and then getting into a space where it's like you're in an industry like that, and you have these moments of being like a human being who like is marvels at like natural beauty of like of life and things happening. All of that is totally real, and people can totally care about wildlife and totally can care about animals and totally can care about the well-being of things. And what's also true is that when you live off of something or you're part of an industry, your ability to dissociate. I'm like beyond the point where I'm going to argue with vegans about stuff, like, which is part of even why I do stuff like this on the podcast, so I don't have to. Um, we can vilify every human being. Fantastic, great. Let's vilify everyone. At the same time, it's like if we're talking about doing like real, like large scale, meaningful, actual change, a farmer probably loves animals and probably loves nature and is just really good at dissociating, because people can dissociate from anything awful or terrible if it is deeply connected to how they make a living or their well-being or how they take care of their family. And it could be farming, it could be all sorts of industries that have negative things. And I think the idea that we like say like, oh, all farmers are murderers and they're heartless and they're this or that is like, I think it is the most obtuse thinking. And to me, it's the hallmark of someone who doesn't take their politics seriously. If the first move is to dehumanize people. I just want to get your thoughts on that. How have you stayed close to your community amidst the change that you've done on your farm?
Well, it was a little messy at first. And I'll tell you, like, I didn't want to be vegan. I did not. I fought it so hard because I was a farmer. It was just, I really thought vegans were so misinformed and just and crazy. And animal activists were just like, did not understand. And I knew how the community talked about, vegans. And so I know I didn't want to be one. But it just got to this place where I was like, I am one. Like I am a vegan. I just like it, the last thing left to do is to call myself that. Um, and so um my community was at first shocked, and we kind of got ghosted a little bit by people. My parents were definitely not happy at all. Um and but I think that it just takes time, and it's been since 2018 that we closed down our chicken house operation. And so there's been like this, like, you know kind of, it dipped down into the darkness, and we kind of felt very isolated. And um like nobody's going to understand this. And the more I tried to explain it to anybody, the worse it got. So we did go through this period of just kind of feeling isolated, and we still are out and about in the community, some. And we still have to buy feed from the feed store, and talk to the we it just kind of slowly, people started to realize we are still Rodney and Jennifer Barrett. And um and then it just started to get more comfortable out in the community. And then last month, my dad died. He was a beloved member of the community. He was a male. He carried the mail and just loved on the whole community. And so they loved him back. And he had a liver transplant in '03. And then this past February, was diagnosed with terminal liver cancer. And then 3 weeks later, he had died. And so during that time, after he was diagnosed terminal, and then until he died, um, the house just was filled with people from the community. Every day there was somebody there. And so while I was there as well, and in this transition of life, it was like, it was so like amazing to see these people who I've known and loved my whole life, since high school, who feel like family to me, um, rally around my dad. And then, just to feel like because they embraced us as well. They embraced the whole family, including me and Rodney and my kids, and um, didn't nothing mattered that we were vegan. That shit didn't matter at all. All that mattered was that we were beloved and that we were seen and witnessed, and that they rallied around during this time of loss. And so this is just very recent that this has happened, and it just really like healed something for me personally, because I tend to get a little depressed and feel sorry for myself sometimes. I mean, I'm a very happy person, but I overthink things a lot. And having been a topic of conversation, and having, kind of been thrown into this position when, like, my whole life I didn't want anything more than to just mind my business out here on my farm and have a quiet life. Um and then to become like this topic of conversation among the community and everything, and being these like weird people, crazy vegans, then I during that time when dad passed, to just see individual faces and hugs and love, and then the way that everybody showed up to the memorial service, and they even made sure that we had vegan food there at the memorial service, these church ladies. And I mean, it meant so much to me. And I think the way that we just stayed true to who we are. And they eventually, the shock of it kind of wore off. And, you know, they found out we're just still human beings.
Let's get back into the story. So your family had taken over the farm in '87. You were 14. You were very, very involved in the farm. You're being raised there, and then eventually you go off. You start your own family, and you're living elsewhere until you have an opportunity to come back and take over the farm from your parents. So tell us about that and kind of going forward from there.
Okay, so I married Rodney in 91, and we moved to Huntsville, Texas, had our kids and jobs and everything there. But always came back to Arkansas to visit. We loved the farm. It- I feel like I belong here, and I always have. And so when Rodney and I were having our kids and everything down in Huntsville, we always came back to visit. And we were always trying to figure out how we could move here. Um, and buying a farm was really expensive, and it was hard to, show how it would cash flow and all of these things. And so to be safe, we just kept our safe jobs in Huntsville. But then the opportunity came up for us to take over this farm, because my dad, he was carrying the mail part-time and got the full-time mail route. So he had that job, which meant that the chicken houses, he wasn't going to be here to take care of the chickens. And they were actually thinking about selling the farm, and we didn't want them to sell the farm. So we just like pleaded with them to let us take the chicken farm over. And they tried really hard to talk us out of it. Because they'd been doing it for 13 years at that point and were tired of it. I mean, it was that was about all they had wanted of it. And so they really wanted to sell out. And so we just asked them if we could take it over, and a lot of conversation. And they finally said, okay. They said, it's yours. And so we raised chickens in those old chicken houses until 2006.
There's a lot of big business that's involved with running agricultural farming at this level. So what could you tell us about some of the misconceptions, some of the traps, like some of the struggle of the North American farmer?
I know from a chicken farming standpoint, that it does look like you are signing up for to be self-employed, to run your own business, to that they're going to provide the chicks, they're going to provide the feed, They're going to sell it. They'll do all the marketing. They do all of the shipping. I mean, like all you have to do, all you have to do is go to the bank and borrow enough money to build these facilities to house the birds. And so the farmer's responsible for the debt on the housing. They're responsible for running the house, the electricity, the propane, all of those components that go into raising chickens. And so by the time, and then we are paid on a tournament system scale, where the farmers who every week the plant has X amount of numbers to give out to the farmers that sell that week, to be spread among X amount of farmers. And if you are above average in weight and livability and all of those things, then and Rodney's like Rain Man and knows all of these things, and he could tell you, he could go way into it, but this is just me from my creative, brain. That they take, so if you're above average, you get above average pay per pound. And if you're below that mark, you get below that average pay per pound, which is significant. If, because if you're raising, millions of pounds of chickens, that 0.01, cent, it adds up to a lot. So depending on where you fall on that scale, when you sell your birds, you really don't ever know how you're going to do. When we first built our new chicken houses, we were in the top 1% for a few years. And even that, we were struggling to get by. But so half your check goes to the bank, and then what you're left with, you pay for propane, you pay for electricity. You have to keep, the floors have to be cleaned. The litter work has to be done. There's equipment, so much equipment, tractors, litter equipment. You've either got to have the equipment to do it yourself or hire it done. So it's just like so much money. It costs the farmer so much to raise those birds that most chicken farmers either have cattle to supplement income, which is what Rodney and I had, or one of the family members, farmers, works off the farm as well. A lot of people with chicken farms also work for the school. Like my dad, he worked for the post office because the money's not there to, it's a cash flow kind of issue. And every farmer, because like what we were hoping for and waiting for was the day your farm's paid off. Because once you get it paid off, then you don't have, half of your check's not going to the bank, which, it's a lot of money. And so that's kind of what every chicken farmer is aiming for, is to get the debt paid off. And then what happens is you get 5 years in or 1 year in, and they want you to upgrade your cool cells. You've got to extend your cool cells by 18 inches or some crap like that. Or you've got to add another fan, or you need these different feeders, or you need these different waterers. Or, they implement all these different kinds of new technologies. And then that's on the farmer to pay. The company does not pay for that. The farmer has to pay for all the upgrades to the housing. And so every time you feel like you're getting a little bit ahead and paying down debt, you got to go back to the bank and refinance, because you got to put in new whatever. And so it's this never ever getting ahead. I don't know many chicken farmers who have paid off their farms. And if they have, it's because they inherited some money or something. They don't do it just from raising the chickens themselves. Um, Now, back in the day, I've heard that you could. Back in the 70s and 80s, when they first came online, people were making money. And that's why people stopped. Like back in I think the 40s and 50s here in Wicks, all of these fields and farms around here were fruit orchards, and there was a cannery. And then when people started making money raising chickens, then everybody switched over to farming chickens. Um, but it it is a scam. I'm just gonna flat out say it. It's a big fat scam. Um, they really make you feel like you're gonna be independent, and um people like Rodney and I, who were really young when we got into it and able-bodied, and felt like, a 15-year commitment to pay off a loan wasn't anything. Um, but then that 15 years turned into 20 years, turned in, it it was never going to get paid off. We got 15 years into it and we still owed almost as much as we did when we started. And it just felt like, this, you were drowning in it. And it wasn't like we live in a mobile home and I mean, we don't eat out, and we were like, it's not like we were living some fancy life or anything. We just, the money's not there. And they would just, Rodney would call it pencil whip you to death. You'd feel like you were getting ahead, and then something would happen, and then you'd just like have a really bad batch of chickens, and um then they'd give you like a 5 flock average or something, but it still just, it never ever, um it was just enough to keep us working, just enough to keep us working. We never felt like we were getting ahead. And we were very committed to it, not just because of the financial obligation. And, we felt that, we went to the bank and we borrowed this money and it's our obligation to pay this back. And, but because we do feel that we belong to this land, and we feel like we wouldn't even know what else to do. We really wouldn't even know what else to do.
Thanks for sticking with me here and kind of building up all of that, because it's what makes what happens next so miraculous. You're multi-generational families or farmers. You love the land. You are deeply committed to the land. You're swimming in debt, but you're committed to paying it off. And you're part of a farming system that's kind of tricked you and trapped you a little bit, and there's no clear way out. So tell us where veganism and that awakening that you've mentioned a number of times, tell us the path on that.
Okay, so in 2011, I quit drinking and went to AA, and that was the first little step. And then in 2013, or maybe it was 2011, I get my dates confused. Rodney was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, and it was very scary. It was like a really terrifying diagnosis. And because he was having
And what is that, by the way?
ulcerative colitis is a inflammatory disease of the bowels. And it was, the symptoms are awful, as you can imagine. Um, it was very much affecting him being able to work, um, sleep, anything. It was really, the symptoms were bad. And then getting that diagnosis, and then, you go down the rabbit hole of, oh my God, it was not good. So the doctor who diagnosed him gave us like zero hope of a cure. It was just something that had to be managed with medication. And so I started digging and trying to figure out, I was like, there has to be some other way. There has to be some other way to fix this. And so over the course of a few years, we started doing things like we stopped eating as much processed foods, like things like we weren't eating like crap out of boxes, and we were eating more veggies and more like what we thought were healthy animal proteins. Um, and then I started going to the chiropractor, started learning some things there about, health and foundational wellness, which started waking up some light bulbs started going off there. Started using like some essential oils and trying to like get him better naturally. And meanwhile, I was also on my own little health journey because I had always been overweight. And around 2013, I started my own path to, because I was just done with being overweight. And started exercising, and we were cleaning up our diet. And I started Beachbody coaching. um Beachbody is the big company, P90X3. I started that's what the program I started with, was P90X3. Started losing weight and feeling better, started integrating exercise into my daily life and just loved it and started feeling so much better. And then in 2016, we were going through some marriage stuff that was pretty hard. But we started going to a counselor who was very much encouraging us to be very vulnerable with each other and honest. And so in this kind of tender time that Rodney and I were in counseling and everything, we decided to do a program that was 3 weeks long. It was a Beachbody program that was called the Ultimate Reset. And we thought, oh, how wonderful this would be. We're kind of resetting everything. We'll do the Ultimate Reset. And since I was Beachbody coaching, my coach encouraged me to do it. She said, because you need to be a product of the product. And this is one of the products. So it's a good thing to go through this program. So it was a little bit of an investment, which for us was like, it was a thing. So we committed to it. It was 3 weeks long, and breakfast, lunch, and dinner was all laid out in this book where, you bought your groceries, did the meal prep. So for those 3 weeks, the first week there was like a little animal protein, egg, and maybe I think there was some salmon. And then the last 2 weeks, it was all plant-based. We also gave up coffee on this thing. And by the end of that 3 weeks, I felt so good. We both did. We were just sleeping really good. We had a lot of mental clarity and energy, just this like really like natural energy without coffee. And we were just feeling so good. And Rodney's ulcerative colitis symptoms were gone, like gone. We knew that was something that could go into remission. But after we did that program, he was having 0 symptoms, and we were feeling so good. But we were still going to work every day in the chicken house and still taking calves to the sale. And so it was kind of when I was going to work in the chicken house, and I had so much more energy to be a good chicken farmer with this plant-based diet. I was very aware of how good I was feeling on this plant-based diet. And I was also, when I worked in the chicken houses, I had a respirator on and goggles, and I would put like a shower cap on with a bandana on it to keep the stink out of my hair. And I put in my earphones and I would listen to podcasts. And so because I was in there for a couple hours every day, and I would just listen to podcasts. And I would listen to Rich Roll. Because I had listened to his book. One of my friends had recommended his book, listened to it, started listening to his podcast. And it was like, it's hard to even describe it. It's hard to even describe how much I was starting to understand the benefits of eating plants and then what the actual fuck is going on in this chicken house right now. Like, why is this happening? I started really asking questions um, about my own diet and my own personal health and how I wanted to move forward. And then I started to consider the consumer. And that's when I really started to become an ethical problem for me, because I was like, it's not just me that I'm hurting by choosing to eat animal protein. Um, but I started to think about, like, who is consuming this, um and I was trying to imagine, is anybody going to be grateful for this chicken? Is anybody going to put it on a salad and eat it with gratitude? Or is it going to provide health and nutrition to the consumer? And I just kept going, no, it's going to go to the plant. They're going to do whatever they have to do to it to kill all the pathogens and stuff on it. Inject it with saline or whatever else they do to process this bird that has been raised so fast. That because Rodney and I had tried to eat some of the chicken that we raised instead of buying it. Thought we would just like process it. We even had one of our friends take some and raise them for a couple weeks after us and then processed them for us. And we couldn't eat them. They were so tough. It was like, I don't know what they do to them at the plant, but I knew that something was going on at the plant. And then when I was buying chicken, it was deep fried. It was breaded, deep fried. It was very processed, this piece of meat. And then starting to like learn and understand the consequences of that that processed meat is a class 1 carcinogen. Learning that was like, it was devastating. It was an impossible position to be in, to understand that you're like raising this product. You're part of this system that is cranking out this product that is like literally making people sick. I don't know what you call that space of like actually being immersed in this like thing that you now know is like a big fat lie. And I didn't want any part of it anymore. But absolutely no way to even begin to know how to get out of it. Um,
I just want to reflect on the intensity of that. Like you're early day vegan, so you're just kind of like early in the diet. You're literally listening to podcasts about veganism as you're in your homemade spacesuit cleaning out cleaning out like these farms filled with like tens of thousands
yeah,
of chickens. Like what an
it was great.
insane moment. Yeah. Um, but then you find yourself like you got this ethical thing that kicks in here. And again, it's like, I'm going to keep returning to this. It's like people who have been raised in an industry that has something to do with like animal processing, like whether it's like, I don't know, you could be like a butcher or you could be a farmer, whatever it is, or people raised with the idea that's like deeply rooted, is just part of your life, that animals are our food.
Mhm.
it it's not about people not giving a shit. It's not about people being bad people. It's about people having a certain kind of life experience that's formed up their thinking about other living beings. But then also you tie in economics and how you make your living, like how, and like debt. I loved how you talked about all like the debt and all those things that trap you into a thing. Making a shift and talking to people about making that shift, it's difficult. And it's not at all weird that people would get defensive or angry or upset about it, because it goes way deeper than just being like, oh, yeah, animals do have a right to live. There's tons of stuff that's involved with it. So that leads us to this point where you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. But you've got the debt. You've built your life with this. You've committed to it. Then what happens?
We did the reset in May of 2016. And by December 2017, Rodney and I had gone round and round and tried to figure out any other way. We were still from that time in 2016, we weren't vegan. We were just introducing more plants into our diet, and we had done the reset and everything. And we did go back to eating animal protein again, but we were moderate in it. And because it's still, that dissonance was still there, and I still couldn't, I was still trying to figure out how to be a chicken farmer and be a vegan. I was trying to figure this out. How could it possibly make this work? And so in that span of time, by December 2017, it was hard to even go in the chicken house anymore. So one day, Rodney and I had just sat out in the truck before we went in, just sat there talking and talking and trying to, I was just like in such a state. I mean, like crying, just like my mind was like fucked. It was so crazy to be in this position. And so I came home from doing chicken housework that day, and I sat down at my computer and I wrote a letter to the universe. I was like, because I had been listening to Rich Roll, and I was like, there's enough vegans out there. And I'd been following Kathy Freston on Instagram because I'd bought her books, and I saw her on Oprah, and really felt a connection with her and wanted. I remember seeing her on Oprah and being like, oh, I want whatever she has, because she had like this just glow and health and sparkle about her. And she's vegan. I bought her book. That was a long time ago. But anyway, I sent the letter to Rich Roll and I sent it to Kathy. And Kathy answered the letter. I got an email back from her the next day. And she put me in touch with someone who was in farm transformation, or was involved with the program that they were trying farm transformation. And that person put me in touch with Sean Munson, who's a documentary filmmaker who did the film Earthlings. He came here, I can't remember what month that was. But everything kind of snowballed after that. Once the vegans came in and the farm transformation culture, I guess came in. We stopped raising chickens in September of 2018, and then the rest is history. I mean, there's been from that time, that's a whole other story. From the time that Kathy answered my letter and that ball got rolling for us to be able to even consider quitting, getting out of the chicken business. And back then it was definitely a leap of faith. It was 100%. We felt like we had a safety net to catch us after the fall. But we free fell for a while. We really did. After we decided to cancel our chicken contract. But I'm fairly newly learning about like quantum physics and the law of attraction. And I can see how, like, looking back on it, everything that I've been held and taken care of, and that whatever this is that's happening, whatever it is that's happened to me, my awakening, Rodney's awakening, whatever it is that's happening here on the farm now with our relationship with the cows we still have, and that it has been such a monumental, like, I've never heard of anything like this before. And so I feel like it's important and impactful, but it also feels scary and uncertain. There's been times when I wanted to go back to raising chickens. There was times when everything was so uncertain that I was just like, at least then I knew what I was doing. at least then there even though the debt at the bank and everything was over our heads, like at least every day when I woke up, I knew what I had to do and how to do it. Um, and then being in the space of, I don't know what's coming next. I don't know what's going to happen to the farm. I don't know, um, if we'll even get to stay. There's been like really times of um, being pretty freaking scared about what's going to happen next. Um, so that's that part.
What was in the letter to the universe?
Desperation, but also it was a cry for help. It was a message in a bottle. It was, here's my situation. I'm in this hell kind of situation going on here, and I don't know how to get out of it. I love my farm. I love my life. I love my family. I don't want to leave here. I don't know what to do, but I know I cannot continue this. Is there anything anybody can do to help us out of this situation?
And what was the help that you received? Like, real specifically, I'm interested in all the people that you were connected to. What's happened with the debt, all that debt that you and your husband took on?
Well, through a series of people, um, we finally were connected with a foundation who is committed to, and their mission is to encourage people to eat a plant-based diet and to move people away from eating animals. And so this foundation has now, they are, they have taken on all the debt. They've paid our debt. The farm's paid for, but it's theirs. Um, and they're now paying us to continue to manage the cows that are here. So the debt that we had on the cows, because the cows were a commodity, which we had taken out a loan at the bank to buy, um, uh, they've they've paid for everything. The farm note at the bank is clear. The cattle note's clear. Everybody's safe. The Barretts are safe. The land, the cows, everyone is safe and being taken care of. And we're getting fairly, an income to, to live and take care of ourselves. And um I don't know any more specifically. I could go through the whole list of people, but it's a kind of a shit show. It has been. I looking back on it, I can see where we were very vulnerable and in a place of we were afraid and vulnerable, and people like that get taken advantage of, and some things happened, that promises were made that didn't get fulfilled, and things like that. But ultimately we ended up under the umbrella and the care of this wonderful foundation, whose mission we were very much aligned with. We're still trying to. Okay, so the foundation also invested in transitioning one of our poultry houses into a mushroom growing facility. Um, and that was what we were really hoping would come to fruition. And it's kind of the path we were on this whole time, was changing from chicken farming to whatever else we could grow in those chicken houses to make us a living, from chickens to whatever. And we had feasibility studies, people come through, specialists, and to um, determine which would be the best, most cost effective, best way to go. And it just kept coming back to mushrooms. Mushrooms were going to be the way to go. We were ecstatic, still are, about mushrooms, crazy about the whole mushroom world. Still feels very brand new, and like it's just opened up to us. But they the investment was through a specific phase of the project where we went through research and development and very much proved that we could grow mushrooms in there. It was successful. But things like outsourcing the substrate was cost prohibitive, and we had some issues um, with that substrate and with this new technology, and that was supposed to be this, new thing that was going to take over the mushroom industry. And then there was also issues with getting contracts. Rodney and I were not involved with any of this planning. Um, there was a consultant and another, what do you call it, organization that was kind of heading up what was happening here at the farm. So we were just carrying out instructions here, and it was going really well. We were growing mushrooms and it was gorgeous and beautiful, and we were really excited about it. But since the distribution part was an issue, marketing, the people who were trying to get us a contract, it was a bit ambitious, if I may say so. They were thinking really large scale, big, huge industrial contracts. And none of that ever came to fruition. And so currently we have this beautiful state of the art mushroom growing facility that's shuttered. And we're still in conversation with people. We're still looking for a way to move that forward, because in my mind, I can't imagine anything more complete, wholesome. It's like this, to go from the depths of stinky, dark, shitty chicken house to gleaming, glowing mushrooms. I just can't think of anything more profound and beautiful, and to streamline it in a way where other chicken farmers can adapt it. But as of right now, it's just at a standstill. And not at a standstill, because we're still, hopeful, and we're still in conversation, and the facility is still there. I mean, it's there. It is there. And so there's so much potential in that area. There's so much potential for it to actually happen. I don't know what has to line up exactly for everything to happen. But I do feel, I have faith that if it's come this far, that I have faith that something will happen. Somebody will see it. Somebody will see the benefit, the potential, the beauty in it, and that it will come back to life.
First of all, thank you for sharing all that, and it's a cool story. It's a really interesting story. But that transitioning to plant-based farming from agricultural farming and animal farming to plant-based farming, it's like, yeah, got to figure it out. Like, it's the figuring it out that I think is so interesting, because think of like old-timey farming, it's like someone's got a farm and they raise some cattle, they raise some crops or whatever it is. It's like, that's not what you're doing. You were doing like modern farming with these big barns and 60,000 chickens, and like you're stuck in the economy of a big corporation that's selling you the chicken, selling you the feed, like doing the marketing and everything. The idea of farming, this like kind of natural, symbiotic thing with the land, that wasn't what you were in. And you're trying to kind of find your way back to that through plant-based farming. And of course it's going to be difficult. And of course it's going to be like, it's like you had this grand experiment with mushrooms and let's see what happens next. But the willingness to take that leap and kind of figure it out as you go along and keep that positive energy, and knowing that positive energy will attract like minds, I think that's awesome. That's amazing. I did want to ask you a question. And by the way, it's like for anyone here who's like, oh, I thought this was going to be a happy ending story. It is a happy ending story, right? Like you're still figuring it out. But there's a couple things I really want to hit on before we move to the end. What do you think would have happened had your letter to the universe gone unanswered? So you put out this letter to the universe and you sent it to two people. How dare you, Ritual, for not
All right.
responding? But where were you, man? But anyways, what would have happened? Where do you think you'd be right now had no one answered?
I've actually asked Rodney that, like, what would we have done? And he said that we would have quit anyway. He said I would have figured something out because he could see how much it was taking a toll on me. And and it was on him too. It was just such an impossible thing to, because I believe that, farmers are people of integrity. I'm not saying that that's exclusive to farmers, but that Rodney and I really we strive to be people of integrity and honesty, to know what we know, and then in that position to have been stuck. um we still didn't feel, I mean, we were definitely stuck financially in the debt and everything, but our spirits were not stuck. And I believe that it would have been, come what may, whatever happens, no matter what happens, we cannot continue down this road. It wasn't just for us anymore, but when we really started to consider the consumer, it was like, I can't raise a product that's going to make somebody else's baby sick, or or my friend, or I can't continue to, like, just participate in this thing. And so I believe that if the letter had gone unanswered, that something would have happened eventually, and probably in short order, that we would have figured out some way to quit, even if it was selling out, which that was not what we wanted to do, was, to sell all the cows, sell the land, sell the farm, keep one tiny little piece of it or something that we could afford. And, you know, I don't know, live in a cabin in the woods for the rest of our life. I don't know, but we could not keep going.
Do you mind if I contrast your young self with your
Mhm.
adult self?
No, I don't mind at all.
It stands out to me that at 14, when you saw how chickens were raised, that they were raised in these giant barns where they were so crowded that they had no space to move. And they had no space to move because that increased their weight
Mhm.
rather than just letting them run around, like run out there and kind of burn off calories or whatever. If we can find chickens in these big barns, then we can get more money for them. And at 14, you're like, oh, that's smart.
Mhm.
Like, oh, that makes sense. That makes sense to me. And then you as an adult running a business that, while there were a lot of financial challenges, you're making a living, and you saying this this might make sense from a business perspective, but I can't sustain this from an ethical or spiritual perspective. And those two things where it's like you can totally see the logic of it at like a young mind, but after as an adult, after living this life, being able to be like, yeah, it still makes sense, but it doesn't make sense for my spirit or my soul or what I think it's right. So no, come what may, and I love that you said that. Come what may, I'm going to get out of
Mhm.
here, and that's going to even start with just writing a letter to the universe, which is the least logical thing to do. So we're like at 14, we're like, well, that makes sense too. Like whatever age you were when you wrote that letter, it's like, dear
Mhm.
universe. But it's the thing that helped you make this like profound change in your life.
Yeah. Um, I feel like I know that I'm a very highly sensitive person. Always have been. And my compassion, especially for animals, has been this huge, like, beach ball that I have had to keep repressed throughout my farming career, throughout, I mean, because you have to make tough decisions when it comes to cows and goats and chicken. I mean, like, they are a commodity. And so livelihood wise, the compassion stayed down. And um and then when I embraced veganism, um that compassion, it like it for a while it was a mess. It was a big mess. Like for a few years it took me a while to regulate, but um I grieved it. I grieved for my own soul, for having been for having lived all of those years repressing my compassion, um and making choices that I knew in my spirit and in my intuition and intellect that were against own um my own sense of what was right and wrong. And so honestly, at 14, I felt like a responsible adult because I had entered into agreement with my dad and with my family, and we were, I was getting up at the bus came and picked us up at 7 a.m. and I had to get my little brother up, and we had picked up chickens before and done all, like I was responsible. And then at 50, I'm 51 now. I just turned 51. I feel like a kid. I feel like that compassion has turned me into like a filled with wonderment and curiosity. And I let my love and my compassion just pour out onto, I don't hold anything back anymore. I don't, when it comes to my grandchildren and my personal pets, the cows now, everybody gets, it just like, I'm just going to give it all. Like, and it does feel childlike. And I've, I'm so free in that. I cannot even explain the freedom that came with just letting my compassion out. Just no longer feeling like I have to make any decision about anything that would compromise that for me. Um, and there's a level of freedom that comes with that that I can't even describe.
Let's hit the last stop because this is again like part of the good news story for me. Tell us about the cattle that you're now the steward of and how the relationship with them has changed since you've changed the
Okay.
farm.
Well, as much as I love to talk about mushrooms, cows are exponentially, I cannot even, I could go on and on and on. Um,
You find it very
yeah,
moving.
it's been healing. Kathy, for us. Oh, hey, you are
Moving.
as well. Um, but my friend Kathy has called me the Jane Goodall of cows. In 2020, was late 2019. They still all were wearing numbers in their ears. They were still part of a cow calf herd. We stopped breeding in June of 2018, about the same time we stopped raising chickens. But so they all had numbers, and we kept finding ourselves having conversations about number 45, number 77, number 13. And I couldn't even hardly bear it for them to be referred to as numbers. So I decided that we were going to exchange all of their ear tags with names. Um, so I had to come up with 250 names. That was a whole thing. That was a challenge in of itself. Came up with 250 names, custom made, 250 ear tags with names on them. So they all have an identity. Every one of them has a name and an identity. And most of them have had a baby and have their babies with them. The herd that we had when we stopped had all been bred. And so the winter of 2019, we had calves. So cow herd doubled and they're all still here. So, but what happened was it allowed the mothers and the babies to all remain together, which never happens. A 10-month-old calf is about at weaning weight, and that's usually less than a year. They are taken from their mothers and taken to the sale barn. So for calves to still be with their mothers almost 6 years later is almost unheard of. The cows that we have are Brangus, which is a cross. They're an F1 cross between a Bremer and an Angus. And they're very known for their salty disposition. We used to call them velociraptors. Um, I mean, a bunch of monster fire-breathing dragons. But the reason that they are that way is because they have their maternal instincts are so developed that they make good mamas. That's why a lot of cattle ranchers choose Brangus, is because they're good mamas. And so now, all these years later, having gotten to know them as these individuals and their names and who their babies are, and watching them, their social structure in this undisturbed environment, them allowing us to be part of that. There's still some that don't let you approach. They're still kind of leery. But most of them, if I'm standing out in the field with them, they don't care that I'm there. And many of them now will approach me for social grooming, which is me scratching them. I mean, I've had them get up from laying down to come over to me now. And it's I really think I should try to find some sort of research grant or something, because I don't think this has happened in the history of ever, of a cattle herd of this caliber, going from cow calf to a velociraptor, fire breathing dragons, to being this, herd full of, I hate calling them cow puppies because it sounds, I don't know. But they're very sweet, very trusting, and being out with them and just being witness to their natural social structures and how emotionally intelligent they are, and how wonderfully funny and quirky, and they all have their own personalities, and just like your dog. It's been healing. I'll tell a quick story, really quick. One of the things that stays with me, I think about this one cow every single day. Her name was Baby, and she was a bottle calf. A lot of times, when you're raising cow calf, something always happens every calf season where one of them ends up needing to be bottle fed. And so this particular bottle baby, I had a herd of goats, and she took up with the goats. She thought she was a goat. She would not stay with the cows. She stayed with the goats. And since I was more intimately involved with the goats and her, I got attached to her, and I named her Baby. And we ended up taking her to the sale barn because that's what farmers do. We don't raise calves for pets. And she eventually it was time, and she had to go to the sale barn. And every single day I see the look on her face. And I don't torture myself and beat myself up about it like I used to, but whenever we offloaded her, she went into the chute at the cell pens, and just with all the other cows that were there, just another head of cow, a cowboy slapped this tag on her ass. They all get a number when they're going through the auction. And then she looked back at me, like confused. And I shut it down. I shut down what I was feeling and went back to the truck and and Rodney, even when he got in the truck, he was like, we can go back and get her. We don't have to sell her. And I was like, we already made this decision and it's already, I mean, like, we're farmers. I was being so practical, so practical. And I thought I was like carrying out good farming practices. And um I think about her every day. And I think about her when I'm out with the cows, and it has healed me to forgive myself for carrying out this act that any farmer or rancher, I mean, that's not unheard of. Um, it is to me now as a vegan to um, look at that situation and go, how could I have made that decision? It would have been like taking my dog and, giving it to somebody to, euthanize and cut up for meat. But I, I hold that memory very sacred and precious to me because it was such a profound, act and action that was completely against my nature. And I knew it when it was happening, but in the name of agriculture, in the name of good cattle farming, ranching practices, I had to make this decision, which I know every farmer and rancher does. And that's why they don't name their cows. That's why they don't do that.
So I can't see Monica right now. Monica and I are married, so she's like sitting right around the corner for me, and I know she's got tears in her eyes based on that story. And like someone listening to this podcast who thinks veganism is stupid and who thinks that animals are here for us to eat would be laughing. Would be like, "Oh, that's so corny, da 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 da." But if you sub in a
Mhm.
dog, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, the thing, and I've hit on this a couple times on the podcast, it just depends like what angle you come at. Like to someone who's vegan or cares about stuff like this, like the story you just told is like super powerful and haunting and matters. And to someone who doesn't care about this stuff, it's ridiculous and stupid. And for someone who is involved in animal agriculture, it's very easy if you're vegan to be like, oh, you're a murderer and you're a terrible person. Where on that side, that person's like, well, no, it's just like good ranching practices, how it's raised, is how I feed my family. None of this stuff is black and white. Like what one person's like incredibly powerful story is another person's joke. What the way that one person makes their living and is like difficult and noble in their mind is murder on another from another person's perspective. And I think to create any not just change in how we interact with the world and the natural world and animals, but even like from a business perspective, a whole lot of like, how do we talk about these things in a respectful way and like really get there with each other over time? Which going right back to some of the earlier conversation when you're talking about your community, it's just like you kind of outlasted them. Eventually, they're like,
Yeah.
okay, still our
Yeah.
people, right? You outlasted them, and of course, a sad event brought you all back together, but you're still there. Well, listen, thank you so much for sharing everything that you shared. Incredible conversation. Before we get to the end, we're gonna take you through the crucial three, and the crucial three is three increasingly difficult questions before we get to the close. You ready to
Sure.
go? Through this process, the process of changing over the farm from being agricultural based to being kind of like a sanctuary and kind of figuring out how it could be plant based. Um, what have you learned about yourself as a person that you wouldn't have known otherwise?
How smart I am and how strong I am. I felt like I had done like I kind of had been bamboozled, and I never felt like chicken farming was ever taken as, a really intellectual job anyway. And so I kind of felt like I was, I don't know. But my very curious mind led me down this to finding this truth. And so I have found out that curiosity is good. and that I am smart. And I don't think I would have known that if I had just kept on chicken farming. I don't think that I would have, you know, I, I don't know. Those are and I also, my resilience, and I think feeling that I'm taken care of no matter what. I really believe that now.
What kind of advice would you have for people who are struggling? They're in an industry or in a position where they're financially tied to something that they deeply disagree with, and it doesn't just have to be animal agriculture. It could be whatever it is. What advice would you have for someone around following their conscience and being able to do that?
Well, I definitely wouldn't quit my job. I wouldn't recommend doing that because that was really hard. But I would very much, I think that um people who are seeking to do the right thing, that there's always a right thing to do. And my other little piece of advice would be to look for the helpers. That's a quote from Mr. Rogers, and that was something that I carried with me. Kathy even said that during times of struggle, was look for the helpers. They're always there. Look for the helpers. Um, if you don't find them writing a letter, then keep looking. They're there. They are there. The helpers are there.
Heck yeah. All right, final question. Um, where do you see yourself 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and 15 years from now? So each one, 5, then 10, then 15. You and the farm.
Oh, that is hard. Well, 5 years from now, I would like to see the cows on more land. Right now, they are like, there's too many for the amount of land we have. So we're having to ship in hay. I would love for them to be um, spread out more and have enough land to sustain themselves. It seems like a big ask, but it's where I see myself going. Because the cows to me are like the cows and the soil have taken like this big priority in my life. Um, and so I see the farm possibly a little bit bigger land wise. Um, the cows are still fairly young, and so they'll still be here. That job will still be there. Um, 10 years as well. We'll still have cows. Um, about the 15-year mark, that's probably when they're really going to start dwindling off. And but I I see myself um writing a book, um possibly, and this is, kind of in the works, making a movie, um and to share my story in as many ways that would make an impact on I don't feel any longer like I have to save the world. But I do feel that I have something to say, and whether that's through writing a book or whatever, I see myself writing and possibly speaking. I still have far to go, but um, by the 15-year mark, as much as I've evolved just over the last 6 years, um, I think by the time I'm 51 now, so how old will I be in 15 years? 66. Um, doing something pretty cool. I don't know what it'll be, but I can see myself having a pretty fucking cool life. So, yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. As we're closing off, anything that you want to share with the audience? Any last words?
Um, Eat more plants, um, eat less animals, and follow your heart. Like, as scary as it is, and even no matter what position you may be in where you feel like you cannot, that it always pays off to listen to your own intuition and follow your heart.
Heck yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. Everyone, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I'm a big believer in following your own heart and eating more veggies. And we'll see you next time on One Step Beyond.